You are entering the Nillyverse with your hosts Gustavo Kenya and Rodney Perry. This episode has been brought to you by the Society of Namecoin. No. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yay.
Yay. Hello, Rodney. How are you doing?
Morning, Gustavo.
Good morning. Good morning. So I guess where I wanted to start was like actually this week we're going to be I think starting to read the book, right? And we're starting at the introduction. It goes, in this phase of life, nothing is more essential to us than academic career, professional respect, and reasoned science.
Well, the epigraph, we put that epigraph in way at the end after we had been working on this for quite a long time.
Yes.
And by that time we were already writing the end of the book, and it struck me as I think about nothing. It's very difficult to speak about nothing in a kind of direct, pithy way. And what I did discover, though, in writing, in being with you on the work for so long, is that my own notion of nothing had evolved and changed. And one of the things I noticed in that change was that it had become a very specific, declarative notion. Mm-hmm. And so what I thought of as a way of kind of like tracking that for our readers was that I would put a statement at the beginning of the book where common notions of nothing would take over its reading. So in the epigraph, the common notion would be, well, I'm a professional now. I've been kind of like in my work for a long time, in my life for a long time. I've become a mature human. And the most important things in life are my career and my profession and reasoned science. And that's how it should be read. But if you look, we don't even mention the interpretation of that epigraph until page 163 of the book. And on page 163 of the book, we analyze what I just talked about, how the notion of nothing can evolve and become a declarative. And so that first reading of the epigraph is hopefully, if you've read the 163 pages, that notion of nothing will have evolved. And the word nothing in the epigraph will become a declarative. So the point is, after reading that point in the book, you should interpret this to mean in this phase of life, nothing pulls at me more, even more so than the academic career, even more so than professional respect and reasoned science. So nothing becomes a declarative notion, and it also becomes one that is attractive. And so I was hoping the readers would get a sense of that change. That was what that was about.
Right. So I think that, when I read it, like, I guess with virgin eyes, or I tried to read it with virgin eyes here, I'd assume that what you're saying is not anything is more essential to us than academic career, professional respect, and reasoned science. At least the first time we read it, right? Not anything is, right? And only by reading the book do we start to sort of read the epigraph differently, right? We start to sort of see, well, maybe no, it's the empty state, right? That is more essential to us. Right. Than academic career, professional respect, and reasoned science, and that would be a nice gestalt there. If we could bring people to consider the two sides of the coin, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. That's great. Yeah. So, all right. So, I mean, when I read through the introduction, I see that we're talking about we're presenting scientists as storytellers, and as in a way actively creating the myth, right, that will help their science endure. What I'd like to think is maybe practical obsolescence, right? When they're when the object, so when the science no longer yields results that are useful, right? That can help us build technology that is good enough to put on shelves, say, for instance, right? Well, then all that will be left of the science, right, is whatever myth, right? And by myth here, I'm sorry, I'm jamming this, like, so I'm assuming much here. I'm assuming that our listeners understand myth not to being like lies, like the myths of not the so the lies of religion, but the myths, right? The things that endure. Maybe you can help me here to elucidate what the difference is between the myth as commonly perceived in popular culture today, right? The myth of religion, the lowercase myth of religion versus the uppercase myth of religion. How about that? Could you share with us, what your thoughts are on
that? Well, the myth in its positive sense, the big one, the big myth, means a whole explanation for what the universe is about, something that we accept. And what we've discovered is that the popularizers have become very central in creating the cultural myth of what the reality is about. The whole story that we tell ourselves about what the world is being created by these popular sciences.
Yeah, I agree. And they have a very captive audience. The audience has been disillusioned by religion for one reason or another, right? And I think that scientists have taken a step up on that ladder and said, like, hey, listen to us, and people are listening. So I think it's important for us, or I think that it's important for us to call them out on some things, because they hold a lot of power. They are creating the myths of the future, and so we just want to make sure that these myths are built correctly, right?
Right.
So I also sort of reading further down that same page, actually, there's this. We know that a lot of scientists, cosmologists or astrophysicists, are in active pursuit of a theory of everything, right? And I myself, when I was young, I had dreams of having one neat little equation that where I can I can just recall and then plug in numbers and I'll just get the answer, and the answer will be right, and I won't need to sort of have any I won't need to believe in anything, right? But the pursuit of the theory of everything, right, versus the pursuit of finding, say, a deistic God, right? Do you see that there? And deistic, I just mean a God that has created the world but isn't actively involved in the world, right?
Okay.
Let's just refrain from sort of bringing in, like, helping atheists come in and strawman us, right? So let's just say a deistic God.
Okay.
Is there a difference between the search for a theory of everything and a person that is, say, for instance, trying to find that deistic God in their life?
Well, one of the things that is it's almost, in a certain sense, it's almost too easy to see the parallels between popular science and traditional religions. They're so obvious and so clear. And at the same time that the popularizers of science are criticizing and actually setting common religious views of the world aside. And one of the ones that was so spoke to us, and it not only spoke to us, it spoke to so many writers, so many science writers, so many historians of science, that there are parallels in the impetus or the striving for a unified theory, that it's parallel to the striving for an understanding of the world through monism. that the world is one thing
Right.
in philosophy. And so there's a it's so clear when you read even the kind of language, the tone of the language of the popularizers, is they are searching in a way that has a zealous quality, a kind of ultimate, not only existential, ontological, meaning the meaning of existence, striving to find one way of describing the world. Just like monism has tried to describe the world as one thing within religious circles. And it's also very parallel to what we've seen in religion called monotheism, striving to say that there's only one God in the world. And those parallels have been pointed out by us and many others. Mm-hmm. And so in a certain sense, when you see all these parallels between the religious life and the life of the popularizers of science, you see that there is a kind of a naivete, a kind of a lack of self-understanding on the part of the popularizers of science about their role in the world.
Right. Would you say then that that the popularizers of science could be amenable to, say, Baruch Spinoza's God, like the pantheistic God, right? That everything that is God. If they had to sort of accept God, right? Then they could possibly accept everything that is being their God. Do you feel that they'd be open to that?
I don't know anything about Spinoza. You'll have to tell me.
I don't know either. I'm just trying to sound smart. No, but my issue with that God is precisely that it does not include nothing. It does not include
I gotcha.
Beyond the is, right? So I would say they might be the scientists.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah.
The scientists might be able to accept a God of everything that is, right? But that would not be sufficient, at least for me, right? For them to I'd want to push for more, right? From science,
right?
And I think that there is more out there, right?
Yeah.
So that's I think. That's the path that I want to take. I wanted to have them accept that there be more than just what is. So going further with the through the introduction, I guess we bring up this idea about like how traditionally, the fields of science and philosophy knew their roles. Right? You could say at the turn of the 20th century, right? I think that no scientist would confuse the questions that philosophy and theology, say, are trying to answer, and the questions that they're trying to answer, right?
Yeah.
Very succinctly, you can sort of separate those two sets of questions very easily, right? And that would be the scientists, right? Back at the turn of the 20th century, knew that they were responsible for answering the how questions, right? Whereas the scientists knew what the business of philosophers and theologians was, right? And that was to answer the why questions. So science was responsible for, I guess, useful, right? Useful solutions, right? And philosophy and theology were more interested in meaning, right? So the how questions were questions that would allow us to extract utility, and the why questions were questions that were going to give us some sense of meaning. Right?
Yeah.
Now that line is getting blurred a little bit, and that's something that we need to make sure that both the scientists and the philosophers and theologians know their role, okay, and stick with what they know and stick with what they do well, right? Here's where I have to take, and here's where I have to bring up, my most influential philosopher of science, Thomas Kuhn, right?
Okay.
And he was the one that first correctly identified for me, right, that scientists, right, their business is in solving problems, right? So, we have cancer, we need to cure cancer. You apply the scientific method ad infinitum until you arrive at the solution. You solve the problem, right, of curing cancer through science. You don't solve it by through philosophy or theology or whatever, right? And just apply that principle, right, across the board, and you'll see, okay, this is the realm of science. This is the realm of science. It solves problems. It's the realm of science, right? And let's reserve those questions about meaning, about truth, right, our place in this world, right, to the philosophers and to the theologians.
Right.
Now things are getting a little bit blurry. Is that what you see too? Like, is that what's happening today?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sure. Well, well, there's two questions. One is the like I say before, this almost naive quality that popularizers of science have to do with their own role in the world. And while denying that they're dealing with the why question, the why question is one that is constantly coming up in new popularizer sciences. And one of the things, for instance, that has a way of talking about how that has more come to be is through the anthropic principle. The anthropic principle says that human beings are inherent to the nature of the manifest world. If it wasn't for human beings, manifest world wouldn't be the way it is. And some of that is that scientists are seeing that the laws of nature are such that we can perceive them with our consciousness. And if it wasn't for our consciousness, these particular laws of nature couldn't be perceived. And so the anthropic principle means that the world is human by its very nature. Is human, that you can't extract a human being. The world wouldn't be like that without humans. And so in proposing an anthropic principle, the popularizers of science have inherently said there's meaning in the world. It can't be proposed. The anthropic principle can't be proposed without human meaning. And so that's a real obvious one.
Well, I agree that is how I read the anthropic principle, and yet the science popularizers of science have found an interpretation of the anthropic principle that the sort of a twist to the anthropic principle. That's otherwise. So there is the strong anthropic principle that you correctly sort of identified, and then there's the weak anthropic principle, and that's the one that the popularizers have latched onto, and that is, roughly speaking, and the best way to do this is through example, right? That if the this is just an example, right? If the multiverse exists and there are infinite number of universes, right? Well, and so why are the conditions so perfect that everything appears so perfectly, and the constants of nature are so fine tuned to evolve such perfection, right? Oh, it must be God. Well, no, the popularizers of science have latched onto the weak anthropic principle, and the weak anthropic principle says essentially that, well, no, it was just the one that happened. We just happened to live on one that everything's perfect, right? And it needed to be this way, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to evolve to the point where we ask these kinds of questions, right? But in an endless number of other universes, no life ever originates, and it was just a question of large probability, right? Like, well, we happen to find ourselves on one that is perfect or close to perfect as we can perceive, right? But it's just fluke, right? Or not fluke, but only in those perfect universes would a being that was able to question these things sort of arise. So they have an escape from that, right? I like to believe, I like your interpretation of the anthropic principle, but theirs is valid, and we have to address that. We don't have to address it now because we want to keep these things short, and that there is a lot to unpack there. But let's keep that on the back burner, and we do get in the book. So let's
okay.
Let's leave it. Bringing it up is because it's in fact one of the things that stuck with me most in my graduate work was this day when a professor of mine sort of was talking about the Rutherford model of the atom.
Yes.
And you know, he sort of is describing it and this was a history of science course, and he's just describing the progression of models of the atom, right?
Yes.
From Leucippus, I think, Democritus to to Dalton to some of the chemists, Lavoisier and such, and then to Rutherford, right? At Rutherford, what you essentially have is a nucleus, right, which has like all of the matter is essentially sort of is focused at the nucleus, right?
Yeah.
And then you have like this very, very light shell where the electron somewhere resides, right? Essentially, yes. Right? So that it's very, very dense at the center, and then very, very light in the space, right? And yes. and that sort of that atoms combine in such a way so as to leave. So if we were to think of them as billiard balls, right? They say two billiard balls come together, right? There's a space in it, like if you think of two circles, right, coming and just touching. Not that this is what he actually thought, but let's take let's just.
It's a good image, yeah.
So say the balls were to touch just at one point, right, and then they extend in space outward. Now remember that we're talking at Rutherford. We're talking at a point where the ether no longer is necessary. So there is no medium outside of the spheres. It's just matter. So when I saw this, when he was illustrated on the board, right, I immediately sort of asked the professor, is that the first model of the void? I believe is what I asked. And he looked at me with this sort of, with this twinkle in his eye, and he said, I have to think about that.
Wow.
I can't think of one of an earlier model of the void because up until that point, nature abhorred vacuum, right? And and so nature had the ether that pervaded all of space, right? Yeah. And remember the Michelson-Morley experiment of I think 1892 or I think between 1892 and 1894, I think, where it was just, experimentally determined that if there is an ether, right, we can't detect it. And then with Einstein's theories of relativity, right, it's theoretically determined that you don't need an ether.
You don't need an ether
to explain, this, explain how light propagates through space, right? So the Rutherford model is right there, right at the edge where these billiard balls in touching, right? The space around it is actually empty, or that there is nothing, or a vacuum, but a true vacuum, right? That exists beyond the realm of matter. And that's something that stuck with me, right? That if all that there was, right, were these billiard balls in a box, right? That the space between it, right, there would be essentially nothing. There's nothing there, and nothing pervades all of it's outside the box, meaning outside the universe, but it's also in the universe, in between the spaces, and no matter how we can't maybe find it, we can't sort of point to it and say here it is, but it's there between the
Yes.
and
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's something. So, you know, let's keep that in our back pocket too, right? As we
Yeah.
go through the book, and maybe bring it up now and again when
Yeah. Well, it's very, I think it's a good in terms of building the notion. You've just built a good picture. Because one of the misleading pictures that people may carry around about nothing is that it's only outside the world, only outside the manifest. Whereas what you've just described is that nothing pervades the manifest. And I think that that's an important one. That's something that we've talked about throughout the book. So that was a good one.
right.
Good image.
Perhaps there's an opening for more than a deistic God, right? Inside. Well, we'll see. We'll leave that.
We'll see. We'll see.
We'll leave that aside. Anyways, there are other things, but you know, in the spirit of wanting to keep it short,
Yeah.
I think maybe that's where we'll leave it for this week. Does that sound good? Is there anything?
Yeah. Can I just say one more thing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is. I was thinking the original manuscript, the first draft of this manuscript is about 3 years ago now.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been a while. And I realized when I was reading back over it this morning that in a certain sense, it's sort of like I've had this experience many times where I'll build a porch or remodel the gazebo or something, and I'll come back to it a little bit later, and it feels as though it's something done by someone else. It's like it's an objective thing I can come to appreciate. And it's really interesting as we come back into the book, and that, you know, the book's actually pretty good. I'm really happy, you know, and I'm trying to speak as not somebody who wrote it, to someone who didn't. That was a very positive experience. And the other one is that I'm just realizing now is that if we do and make it through the book in terms of these podcasts that you're creating, is that I bet you the book's going to be something quite different by the time we get done as well.
Yeah, we're creating it. We're creating it right now.
We're reading it.
Yeah.
We're talking about it as if readers. Very interesting.
Right.
I think it's going to be cool. So thank you for setting these up.
Thank you for joining me here. So we'll join you next week. Entering the Universe has been brought to you by the Society of Namecoin. Until next time. No.